here that there has been an increase in the export of pharmaceutical sector, and among the manufactured goods, it has seen highest rise, that is 4.2% between 2008 and 2018. When you talk about the professional and management consulting, this is another area seeing the highest level of increase between 2008 to 2018. And this increases to the tune of 6.5%. Decrease has happened in iron and steel, which has decreased at the annual rate of 2.3% from 2008 to 2018. We have already discussed earlier about the levy of tariff on the import of iron and steel by United States of America. In fact, India, along with many other nations, including Canada and Norway, have gone to the World Trade Organization and complained against the imposition of escalated tariff by United States of America. Another thing which saw a decline is sea transport service, and this decreased at an annual average rate of 1% between 2008 and 2018. If you talk about the share of developed versus the developing nations, then we can see that the developing economies have 44% share in the world trade merchandise in the year 2018, which is again a positive development, reflecting that to a certain extent, World Trade Organization has been able to create a level playing field for the developing economies. Even in services sectors, we can find that they had 34% share of the world trade. And if you just look at the merchandise export between the WTO member nations, then this is $19.09 trillion. This is the 2018 figure. Now we are in the COVID time. So what has been the impact of COVID? There is an apprehension that the global trade may fall by between 13% to 32% in the year 2020, because we all remember how lockdown happened in our country, and this was not just confined to India. Most of the big nations, including United States of America, all European nations, and some of the African nations, they all had lockdown period of varying duration. But the impact was that economic activity was adversely affected, and there is now an apprehension as to how the member nations can deal with this pandemic, which is coming up as a second surge in many of the nations. So let us see how we are able to deal with this situation. So far we saw the pattern of the trade. We saw what are the factors which facilitate trade and what are some of the impediments to the international business. Now we will talk about the agency, the organization, which have a major role to play in the emergence of growth of the world business. So we had General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, that is GATT, which was one of the rule-based organization ensuring that the international business happens in harmony without any kind of trade friction. Incidentally, India was the original signatory in 1947. 1948, GATT started its operations, and the intent was to have greater market access by removing the tariff. Several rounds of negotiations took place between the member nation, and the intent was to reduce tariff. in Tokyo, when the deliberations and negotiations started, they also included the non-tariff barriers. Some of the non-tariff barriers in the form of sanitary and phytosanitary measures were not covered, but others such as the import quota and voluntary export restraint and the administrative delays, all of these were discussed in the Tokyo round of negotiation. So one of the final round was the Uruguay round, which started in 1986 and ended in 1993. And this was the round which resulted into recognition by the national governments that we need to have another organization to replace GATT, and this new body should also include some of the issues, aspects of international business not covered by GATT. And we had Marrakesh Agreement, which led to establishment of World Trade Organization on 1st January 1995. What it is, what is the significance of the agreements and the instruments which are part and parcel of the annexures in the WTO is something that we will see. So you need to understand that the origin, the emergence of World Trade Organization has changed the face of international trade because many new areas have come up, services. So we have General Agreement on Trade in Services, GATS. We have TRIPS, which is about the intellectual property such as patent, copyrights, geographical indicators, the traditional know-how, and the softwares. So WTO has many annexures. It is a rule-based system. There is documentation of the different rules which govern different aspects of international business. So we have Annexure 1A, which covers the multilateral agreement on trade in goods. Then you have agreement on agriculture, agreement on sanitary and phytosanitary measures, which is about the protection of flora, fauna, and animal life. Then you have the agreement on textile and clothing, because that is a substantive international business. Then you have agreement about technical barriers to trade. Then you have agreement on subsidies and countervailing measures, agreement on trade-related investment measures, and then there are agreement on safeguards. These safeguards are the additional tariff that the member nations may impose, citing that there are serious injury to the domestic industry. Then you have Annexure 1B. So first was Annexure 1A, then you have Annexure 1B, which is about General Agreement on Trade related to Services. 1C is about intellectual property rights products. Then you have Annexure 2, which covers the rules and procedures governing the settlement of disputes, about which we will discuss now. Then you have Annexure 3, which is about the trade policy review mechanism, because world trade evolves and there will be new policy issues which will come from time to time. Then there are certain plurilateral trade agreement. We say that World Trade Organization is a multilateral forum, which means that all the member nations have to adopt it as a single undertaking. But then there are certain group of products about which the trade is restricted to few nations of the members, a few member nations, and so these will be covered under plurilateral trade agreements. Then there are ministerial decisions and declarations which come from time to time. So now let us understand who are the members of WTO. So all the members of GATT become the WTO members by default. So therefore, sometimes it is said that it is a privileged club of nations, and it is not a fundamental right to get membership. There is a process. this process is the process of negotiate. The member nations who could not join, you know, as who were not the GATT members uh, do not get the membership by default. So they have to convince the WTO that they have the policy and mechanism in place which ensures that there will be adherence to the rule-based system of WTO. And this process of accession is something that takes many, many years, and China took 14 years to become a member. One of the recent entrant has been Russia, which became a member on 22nd August 2012. So what is the purpose of World Trade Organization? I'm sure by now you would have understood that one of the primary purposes is to create the effect to create free trade, which leads to raising the standard of living of people, because consumer is the gainer in terms of lower prices, in terms of choice, in terms of access to many products. It leads to full employment and large and steady growing volume of the real income and effective demand. It has the intent to expand production of goods and services and optimal use of world resources, ensuring that there is sustainable development and we have sufficient for the next generations to fall back on. We need to protect the environment and help the member nations as per their requirement.
Oh, the trend.
This you will not be able to hear, so I will share the link later. So we move to the scope of World Trade Organization. So you just heard President Trump, and he was at his best. And what is the thing that he can do best? To curse the multilateral agencies such as World Trade Organization and World Health Organization. Anyway, we will talk about that later. So let us talk about the scope of World Trade Organization. So it is providing a common institutional framework for conducting the trade relation among the member nations. We have seen the agreements as part of different annexures, and these are binding on all the member nations. What are the functions? To facilitate implementation, administration, and operations of different agreements, such as the General Agreement on Trade in Services. It is a forum for negotiation. When there is a dispute, member nations can go for consultation and negotiation, and if they are not able to settle it by that, then they can fall back on the dispute settlement process of World Trade Organization through the formation of panel and the appellate bodies. Then they need to administer the trade policy, and they need to review the trade policy from time to time. They also need to cooperate with International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Now this is really important. What are the basic principles of WTO? You might have heard this term MFN, or most favored nation. There is often a talk about MFN between India and Pakistan, and why India unilaterally accorded most favored nation treatment to Pakistan. But you need to understand that basically when we talk about the most favored nation, any incentive, any kind of benefit, any concession that you offer to one member nation, that has to be offered to all other member nations. This is the principle of MFN, or most favored nation. That means all nations who are member countries, members of WTO, have to be given equal treatment without any kind of discrimination. Okay? Then the next principle is that of national treatment. It means that once a foreign product is able to enter any national boundary and paid all the requisite tariff, completes all the documentation procedure, there will not be any discrimination between the domestic company and this imported product. So the domestic product and imported product will be treated similarly. So if GST for a set of goods is curtailed at 5% for domestic sector, then for any such product coming from another nation will also be levied 5% GST. So that is the national treatment. There is a transparent system because it is rule based, and particularly when you talk about the dispute among the member nation, there is a process, there is a rule, and this rule facilitates in the conflict resolution. But then we can see that there are some developed nations, there are some developing nations, and then there are least developed nations. So can they be accorded similar treatment? No. So there is a special and differential treatment for the least developed nations. They get certain concessions which are not applicable to the developed nations or the developing nation. And the key pillar of WTO is the process of negotiation. Negotiation about all the various issues related to international business, about the conflict between the member nations. Coming to the structure, we have a ministerial conference and we have the General Council, we have the Council for Trade in Goods, we have the Council for Trade in Services, then we have Council for Trade related aspects of intellectual property rights, or TRIPS as it is popularly known as. Then you have the Dispute Settlement Body, which is again under the General Council, DSP. Then you have the Committee on Balance of Payment Restriction, Budget, Finance and Administration. So this is the structure of World Trade Organization. You have a Director General who chairs the WTO, and he is supported by a secretariat. And when it comes to decision making in WTO, it is by consensus. Only in the rare cases when consensus is not reached, then voting takes place. And the decisions are then taken by voting. We have already discussed about the gains from World Trade Organization, how it has created a new order, which is that world is one economic unit, as you can see over here. There has been elimination and reduction in tariff and the non-tariff barrier. This is a transparent system which provides security and predictability to international trade. It has ensured peaceful settlement of many trade disputes, and there is a multilateral forum for trade negotiation through the ministerial conferences. We find that the member nations continue to deliberate on various issues, some of the new issues such as e-commerce and the old issues, the contentious issues of government procurement and what should be the rules for such procurement. When you talk about India, we have seen that India has gained through this process of being a member of GATT and then WTO, particularly the time that WTO came into existence, 1995 till this time, we have seen how our life has changed. In 2005, if I had to get a telephone connection, I could get it instantly. Even today, in 2020, if I want to get a telephone connection, then I will get so many telephone calls from the competing companies. Of course, it's a different matter that the number of companies has now reduced So there has been alliance between Idea of Birla Group and Vodafone, and so in a way the competition is now limited. You have MTNL and BSNL, and then you have Vodafone, and then you have Jio and Airtel. But you will have to choose. So you have the right to choose. But in 1995, when I wanted to have a telecom connection, which was the landline connection, I had to wait for 4 years. So when I applied in 1995, I could not get the connection. It was only in the 1998 December that I could get the connection. But then the town where I was living, was Hamirpur in Himachal. And by the time I could get the connection, I relocated to Delhi. So I did not get the landline connectivity in Himachal between 1994 December to 1998 December. I could not get the connection. So that is how it used to be. So there has been a revolution in telecom technology, in the banking sector, and so many other services that we enjoy now. So in spite of all of these benefits, the member nations come up with some or the other issues related to global business, and therefore there is need for a dispute settlement process. So we will take a break before we talk about the dispute settlement process. We will go into detail. I will stop sharing, and we will stop the recording as well. So we will have a break, and what will you